Hello friends, SentinalH here, and welcome back to our Immersive Engineering tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to take a look at conveyor belts, how to move items around using Immersive Engineering with the item router, and we're also going to take a look at crafting our first multi-block machine, the assembler. That's going to be the main focus of this episode. The assembler is a really useful machine, especially in combination with the conveyor system and the item router. So let's get into this, shall we? First, let's talk about conveyor belts. If we come over here, we can see how to craft it. So conveyor belts are really useful, and they're Immersive Engineering's way of moving items around a factory. They're crafted quite simply with 3 leather, 2 iron ingots, and 1 piece of redstone dust, and you get 8 conveyor belts. So it's a pretty good ratio of leather and stuff to conveyor belts. So you're going to want a cow farm to keep getting a nice source of leather, but you shouldn't have too much trouble getting enough to make conveyor belts, since you do get 8 of them. Now, when you right-click a conveyor belt on the ground, by default, it will always be traveling away from the direction that you placed it. So in the direction that you place it is where it's going to travel when you place it down. However, if you hold shift when you place it, it will instead travel towards you. You can have 2 conveyor belts moving in opposing directions, although that won't really do anything for you. And if you take a engineer's hammer and right-click on the conveyor belt, you can rotate it. However, you can also do one more thing. If you hold shift and right-click, you can make the conveyor belt go up or down, and that allows you to, and then you can rotate it as well by not holding shift. And that allows you to move items up and down to different layers. For example, if I then go ahead and place a conveyor belt over here to rotate it, I would have a conveyor belt system here that would take items up this little slope and have them up on a higher level. Yes, and if you notice, if you stand on a conveyor belt, it sort of locks you into the conveyor belt. You can't fall off of it if you try and strafe left and right. You kind of can, but it seems to like try and lock you into it. You have to jump. So you can ride your conveyor belts as well. So what the conveyor belt does is, if you throw an item onto it, it will just get moved along, and that's how you do. Now, this is kind of like Factorio, really. However, there aren't any curved conveyor belts. Instead, when you place the conveyor belt like so, and throw an item onto it, this conveyor belt will push it onto this conveyor belt, which will get it to go in that direction. So yeah, it's a little bit like Factorio. So then obviously, if you wanted to, and I don't know, in what universe this would be a useful thing to do, you could go ahead and make yourself just an infinite loop of conveyor belts, and the item will ride across it for all eternity. Alright? So that is the conveyor belt. They're pretty cool. I like them. I like the look of them. I want to build a whole factory in the Let's Play series full of these conveyor belts, because I think they look really, really sweet. Alright, now, the item router. We can't talk about conveyor belts without talking about the item router, because this is how you move things around and filter them in Immersive Engineering. So, item router is crafted with 4 iron ingots, 2 redstone dust, 2 treated wood planks, and an iron mechanical component, which we've already taken a look at how to craft previously. So, the item router does exactly what it sounds like it does. You place it down, and it's got all these different multicolored sides, including the underside of it. If I kind of go up here so you can see, there is also the black sides on the bottom. So let's go into the GUI. You can see north, south, east, and west, top and bottom. You can filter up to 8 items in each direction, and they have various settings. You can filter via the OR dictionary or not. You can filter with NBT data or not. Or you can turn on fuzzy or not, so that it will ignore damage values. By default, these are all turned off, and according to the engineer's manual, for instance, turning on OR dictionary will slightly slow down the performance of the item router. And I've never actually seen any sort of performance hit, but maybe you've had a bunch of these in OR dictionary mode. I have no idea. What I do know, however, is the way to use the item router is it's designed to work with conveyor belts. Okay, so now I have some conveyor belts going into the item router. However, that's not enough. You also need conveyor belts coming out of the item router. Okay, and let me explain why. So let's say I wanted to throw some logs onto this item router, and I wanted them to come out the red side. Well, I would place the oak wood log in the red part of the GUI and throw it on one of the sides. However, it's not going to get spit out the red side. The reason for that is that there's no way for it to output. It needs some inventory on this side. It doesn't have to be a conveyor belt. It can also be a different type of inventory, such as a chest. So now if I were to place that on the red side, when I throw this in, it doesn't get spit out the sides. It gets placed into the chest. So it doesn't have to be conveyor belts, but it has to be some sort of inventory. Something that can accept items needs to be on the side in order for it to actually work. Otherwise, if it doesn't have if the item router can't send the item down a path, it will send it down an unfiltered path. So if you leave one of the output sections with no items in its filter, that will be the default route for anything that the item router doesn't recognize, okay, which can be useful. So now if we put this item in the, for instance, the yellow side, and we throw it onto this conveyor belt, it'll have no problems coming out the yellow side because there are conveyor belts there. Now, what if we wanted an equal number of items? What if we wanted logs to go in both directions, the yellow side and the green side? Well, we can actually do that. Now, the item router is not by default set up. It's not really designed, I don't think, to split items evenly. However, over time, it appears to average out that way, even if it starts sending items the same direction a whole bunch of times. So that's about a stack. I think that was 63 logs, and what we got is 46 out of this side, and we got, the rest, which is like, that wasn't actually a very good split. But I did this once before, and it split it pretty darn well. Basically, if you put the same item in two different outputs, it appears to average out over time to roughly 50-50. Not quite. We got 26 instead of like 32, but it was pretty darn close. Okay, so that's the item router. This thing would also, Immersive Engineering would also work very well with the item filters from Rotary Craft, since you can use conveyor belts to drop items into it and filter it out. So anyway, lots of synergies with other mods, but that's the item router. Pretty darn cool. For filtering items around your place. Now, the assembler, which is what we're primarily going to be talking about here now, you will find it in the engineer's manual under heavy machinery. And there's the assembler right there. And they'll show you how to craft it. Crafting the assembler requires 9 steel scaffolding, 4 light engineering blocks, 6 sheet metal blocks, 6 structural arm blocks, and 2 conveyor belts. So let's take a look at how to craft all this stuff. We talked about sheet metal previously, so we don't have to talk about that now. However, to make steel scaffolding, which is a very common component for all of these multi-block structures, you need steel fences. And to get steel fences, you need steel rods. And this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, but to craft a steel rod, you get 4 for 2 steel ingots in a crafting station, so they're basically just sticks. So 2 steel ingots on top of each other will get you 4 steel rods, and then it's 6 steel rods to get 2 steel fence, so just like the regular fence recipe. The steel scaffolding is 3 steel fences, and then 3 steel ingots on top, which gives you 6 steel scaffolding. And you can actually climb scaffolding like it was a ladder, whether it's the steel kind or whether it's the treated wood kind, so that's pretty darn useful. Then you're going to need light engineering blocks, and to craft that, you need 2 iron mechanical components, which we saw how to craft in a previous episode, 3 copper ingots through the center, and then 4 iron ingots, 1 in each corner. That gives you 2 light engineering blocks. You're going to be crafting an awful lot of light engineering blocks, so this might be one of the first things that you automate using assemblers. Who knows? Depends on whether you want to or not. I think they look really cool, by the way. Now, you're going to need these structural arms. They're basically like, 45-degree angles of the scaffolds, kind of like remind me of carpenter's blocks. And these are crafted using 6 steel scaffolding in the same shape as the stairs, and you actually do get 4. So it's the same recipe as vanilla stairs made out of steel scaffolding. So kind of expensive, but it's actually a lot of steel. scaffolding to structural arms, although since you get 6 out of this recipe, you only have to craft a steel scaffolding recipe once in order to be able to craft a structural arm recipe. Okay? So once you've acquired everything that you need to build your assembler, all of these items here on the right, it's time to assemble it. So we're going to do that here, and then I'm going to go over there and show you one setup. So to build the assembler, and the book does show you how, this little animation here, which you can pause and play, or if you pause it, you can go up and down. We'll show you exactly how to craft it. So you need to lay down a 3x3 of steel scaffolding on the ground. Then you need to lay down a conveyor belt facing into the machine on one end, and another conveyor belt facing out of the machine on the other side, and put a light engineering block in the middle. So the path of these conveyors flows through the machine. Okay? Then take sheet metal blocks, 6 of them, and place them on the sides like that. Then take structural arms and place them like this, basically like you're making a roof. And then fill the center with light engineering blocks. Now you can form the multi-block by smacking it with an engineer's hammer. I forget what part you actually have to hit in order to form this thing. Oops. Oh, there we go. I finally got it to form up. Alright. So just whack it with a hammer and you'll get it to form. It looks really awesome, as you can see, and the arrow on the side will let you know the order, the direction of operation. You can't use the hammer to flip the input-output direction to rotate this machine. You need to set the direction when you place it down. Otherwise you have to break it and rebuild it in the right orientation to get it turned into a different direction. It's got a little crafting grid symbol on the side, so you know what it is at a glance. Although it should be pretty obvious. Once you get used to this mod, you probably won't forget. At the top here, you can see the little copper bit, and the reason for that is because that's where the power goes. So you'll take your LV wire connector and slap it on the top like that, and that's where you need to put the power to run this thing. It has an internal storage for 16,000 RF. On the back here, on the input side, in order to put items into this thing, you'll just attach conveyor belts to it. You'll need to hold shift to place the first one, which means you'll have to rotate it back around. But then you can just run conveyors into the assembler here. If you wanted to use applied energistics to get items in here, I don't know if you can slap it straight on the back, or if you'd have to put a formation plane above a conveyor belt. I haven't actually used those two mods together yet, but I do know that it works, that you just have to simply run the items into the machine. Now, this little thing on the bottom here is actually a fluid port. Because there are a lot of recipes... Where did the pipes go? Because there are a lot of recipes in the game that require fluids to craft, you can place fluid pipes up against this and run a number of different fluids into this thing. There is an internal storage for 3 different types of fluids at once. So yes, you can run multiple types of fluids through this connected fluid pipe and store up to 3 different fluids in here. And if you have a recipe in here that requires a fluid, it will be substituted with fluid from these tanks. So let's briefly talk about this GUI here. This meter right here shows how much RF is in the machine. These are the 3 fluid tanks, which each store 8,000 millibuckets, and you have space for 3 different crafting recipes. You take your items and place them in here, and it creates the recipes. It doesn't actually take the items. If you want to clear a recipe, you click the little X button, and it clears the recipe out. And these slots down here are buffer slots for items. So if you put items into the assembler, on the input side, they will end up in there, and we can demonstrate that very quickly by placing conveyors here. And then if we just chuck something into the machine like that, it'll go down in here. It'll stay there until you take it out, or if it's used in a crafting recipe. Okay. Now, one of the most useful features about the assembler is that it's able to sequentially craft. Now, what do I mean by that? These 3 crafting grids can actually be used together in order. Okay, so let's say you wanted to be able to craft, I don't know, ladders, wooden ladders, and you wanted to just throw a bunch of logs in order to do it, you could actually do that. If I put a log in here, it'll tell the system that, oh yeah, take oak wood logs and turn them into planks. Then if I take planks, I can tell the system, oh yeah, take 2 planks and turn them into 4 sticks. And then if I grab some sticks, I can tell the system, craft ladders. And if I throw logs in here, it will actually craft the logs into planks, and then immediately craft those planks into sticks, and then immediately craft those sticks into ladders. And I will demonstrate that in a moment, because we're going to head down over there and now check out an assembler that I had set up earlier. So we're going to go check that out. It's fully powered, and we'll go experiment with some stuff. Okie dokie. So over here, I've set up a bit of a processing system. We've got some coke ovens. Each of them has a fluid pump on top, which will which will pump the creosote oil out into this creosote fluid tank. Yeah. The fluid tank has a lever on it so it can output stuff, and the pipe is connected to the assembler. In case you know, it's pretty obvious what this assembler was being used for. It's being used to craft treated wood planks. Okay, using creosote oil, which it's going to get from the internal tank, and logs. So here I have it set up to craft oak wood logs into oak wood planks and creosote oil into treated wood planks. And if I wanted to, I could go in and I could also add another recipe if I grab myself some more treated wood planks. I can tell this system here to craft some. Now we're going to craft some treated wood sticks. Okay? Now watch what happens when I chuck the oak wood in. Now, just before we do that, actually, though, I have a couple of item routers set up here. This item router is set to take oak wood and put it out the red side while outputting coal through the green side. And this one is set up to output coal through the green and red side to feed coal into these coke ovens. So if I go ahead and I chuck a bunch of coal out of my inventory, it will go through the first one and into the second one. Now this is the thing. If all of the items are clumped up together, like this whole stack was, they will be sent down one side of the item router. However, if it's kind of staggered and broken up, it will have a chance to, go in different directions. Now, I don't know for sure if this will work. No, it doesn't. I would need to put an item router on here in order to get the items from the chest onto the conveyor belt. But we can try that. Actually, I don't know if that will work either. I don't know if we can just put a chest here. No, we can't, because there's nothing telling the item router to pull things out anyway. So that's not going to work. But we can throw things onto the conveyor belt anyway. So if I very carefully throw the coal onto the conveyor belt, making sure each piece of coal is a separate piece of coal, we can see that now it's sending some of it into the first coke oven, but now it's sending some of it into the second coke oven. Okay? So if you're going to use item routers to try and split your items roughly in half and send them down different directions or in thirds, who knows, you need to make sure that the items are not clumped up into a single stack, because that will not work. Now let's throw some oak wood on here and see what the assembler does. We're just going to chuck some on. And let's see what comes out the other end. Oh look, treated wood sticks. No, this isn't actually set up right. How'd that get turned around? We're getting treated wood sticks coming out the other end. Why? Because we told it to craft logs into planks, planks and creosote oil into treated planks, and treated planks into treated sticks. Okay? If we go ahead and clear this recipe out so it won't make sticks, we can get planks instead. And treated wood planks. Now, that's not to say that each one of these recipes has to be a sequential recipe. they don't. If I tell this thing to craft some chests as well as creosote, this might actually not work. Because these are fired in order, and these are both using planks, I'm pretty sure we will only get treated wood planks out of this assembler. I'm pretty sure it will not craft any chests. Yeah, see, it's not going to craft any chests because the slots have priority. So always remember that the slot on the crafting recipe on the far left has priority. It will always be run first, second, and third in that order. If I wanted to place another recipe on here, for instance, if it used a different material, well, that would work. That would be different. So actually, let's do something actually useful. Let's say that I want to tell this thing to craft me some of these steel rods because I want to make some more scaffolds. Well, if I throw some steel ingots on here and some oak wood... Oh crap, I forgot. The steel ingots haven't been sorted. So let's just pop that there. We're going to get our planks and we're going to get our steel rods. So you need to watch out what recipes you put in the same assembler. So one assembler can craft up to 3 different things, but if you're using the same materials, if it's to craft it, well, it's going to use these other ones, giving them priority. Okay, so because we're using oak wood planks in the second recipe, we really can't put anything over here that uses oak wood planks, because as soon as the machine gets enough planks in its inventory, it's gonna craft this recipe. Alright, it's gonna craft it. Now, the way around that would be to place those kind of recipes here and then place this one over there. Then, as long as it had creosote oil. Basically what I'm saying is, if I wanted to also have a recipe that crafts sticks in this machine, I would need to place the stick recipe here. But the problem with that is that it would never craft the treated wood planks because it uses oak wood. Okay? I don't want to confuse anyone, but that's how it works. These recipes have priority. So if you're going to craft recipes that use the same material, you're going to want to use multiple assemblers. Unless you're actually using the output from one recipe in the next recipe. In which case, you can do up to 3 steps. It'll work no problem. You can chain these things together to craft long, output strands. If I wanted to set this up, for instance, maybe I want to craft those scaffolds. So I'm going to need myself some steel rods. Then I'm going to need to craft those steel rods into steel fences. And then I need to craft those steel fences with some steel ingots, and that will give me steel scaffolds. Now, if I chuck enough steel onto this thing, that should be plenty. That's exactly what we will get. It will go through and craft the rods, craft the fences, and then craft the scaffolds. And it knows that it's going to want to craft the scaffolds, so it didn't use all of the steel ingots just crafting steel rods. Okay? Let's show that again and look at it. So it's not going to use all of the steel ingots just to craft steel rods. No, actually it did. Didn't craft any steel scaffolds. So that is a problem. Yeah. So in that case, you got a bit of an issue. I think the way to fix that, as I briefly mentioned, is to do this. Place the scaffolds one first. I think this might work. Then we'll tell it to craft that, and then the very last one in the line will be the crafting of the fences. Now, if this works, what's going to happen is it's always going to craft scaffolds if it's possible. So you got playing around with the assembler a little bit. Okay, so see, it's now crafting rods. Fences are coming out though. Yeah, so you just it's a bit of an issue. You can't really do that. So unfortunately, I can't seem to set this up to actually craft steel scaffolds, unless it actually did craft steel scaffolds, in which case I didn't notice. But that's the assembler. I hope it's not super confusing. Just remember that it will craft these slots in order. It has room for 3 different types of fluids, and it runs on RF. Alright? So, I hope you kind of enjoyed this episode. I hope you now know how to use the assembler. I like the assembler. I like that it's a small little machine. It looks cool. It doesn't take up a terrible amount of space in a factory. You could chain these together to make very long production chains. And yeah, it's definitely a far cry from our Applied Energistics auto crafting, where it doesn't take up very much space at all. This is a big machine, and that's what I like about immersive engineering. Is it's got big machines that look awesome, and you'll end up making a really, really attractive factory as well as a very useful factory. So that was the assembler, that was our conveyor belt look, and that was our item ladder look. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for future episodes. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at another little machine, the plate bender, whatever it's called, and as well as something else that I haven't decided yet. So stay tuned for future episodes. I'm SentinalH, and I'm signing out.